Hello, writers. It's Megan coming at you live in All Writers Welcome. I've got my husky getting over a cold voice on. Very exciting. And today I want to talk about planning an inspired central conflict. Ooh, why? The conflict is the center of your story. It's the core, it's the beating heart of your story. So what's really cool is if you can create a central conflict that you're really clear about, then writing all the rest of your parts of your story is going to be a lot easier. Here's why. There's a lot going on in a novel, right? It's tens of thousands of words. And so if you approach your novel thinking about trying to hold all those words and all those ideas at the same time, it's pretty overwhelming, right? It goes out in time, it goes out in space. But if you create a central conflict, it's something you can hold in your hands. It's a small enough concept that you can see it all at once. But just like a beating heart, your central conflict sends out blood, it sends out energy to all the rest of the parts of your story. So imagine it, that beating heart in your hands. That's your central conflict. And once you've created that, I promise you it will send out the energy you need to all the rest of your parts, all the rest of the parts of your novel. So let's look at creating that central conflict. Now, I call it an inspired central conflict for two reasons. The first is it has to feel like inspired. It has to feel like an inspired idea, something you're really excited to write about. That's because it's going to direct everything. All of the scenes, all of the action that occurs will come back to your central conflict. So it had better be exciting to you. It better be something that's got enough charge, enough momentum and emotion for you to power the rest of your story. It's got to feel good. It's got to feel exciting. So that's one reason I call it inspired. The second reason I call it inspired is because the easiest way to come up with a great central conflict is not to sit down and be analytical and make your novel into some kind of complex equation where if I have enough elements, then it yields the right results. The best way to come up with a central conflict is to get, wait for it, inspired. And I'm going to walk you through 3 different ways that I get inspired and that I've seen writers get inspired that I know work for coming up with a central conflict. And you can choose any one of them or a combination of them to get you going on your inspired central conflict. All right, so the first point of inspiration you might have for a central conflict is a character. Some writers think in characters without even meaning to. You can't help it. Maybe you wake up in the middle of the night and some voice is in your head and it's a character and he's telling you everything about his life and you know how he talks and where he lives. Oh, hey, Carrie, good to see you. So that might be a really inspiring point to you, a character. How do you build a conflict from a character? Well, you think about this person's traits. Those traits might be flaws. They might be just interesting characteristics about somebody. For example, a perfectionist. Ooh, an interesting trait. You could do something with that trait. Or you might go for your character's powers, especially if you're writing science fiction or fantasy, you're writing in a genre where there are literal powers, or there could be metaphoric powers. Hey, Dana, nice to see you. Or you could even get inspired by a formative experience that your character has, something that happens, his origin story and everything else goes out from that. So if you really love thinking about characters, if characters inspire you, what you can do is get a sense of your character. Who is this person? What is the strongest trait / what's the origin story? And then just start brainstorming what is a conflict that could arise from that. So I gave the example of a character who's a perfectionist. Ooh, I can imagine a lot of situations, or I can imagine a lot of problems that arise from being a perfectionist. And then I start asking, do I want my character to stay a perfectionist? Or do I want her to somehow get over it? Do I want her to learn and change and do something different? And then from there, I start thinking, what's the situation I would put her in that would cause her to learn or cause her to change. And all of a sudden, from one trait, perfectionism, I'm starting to think through a conflict. I'm starting to think, ooh, she needs to have something that her perfectionism smashes up against, and she can't get forward until she makes a change. And then I have to figure out what's on the other side of that change. So that gets me going on a central conflict. And again, I'm choosing something really interesting, so it will keep me inspired. So this is one way you can get inspired about your central conflict. You can choose a character trait, either a live person who's talking to you, some character who feels fully formed in your mind, or just a character trait, and start thinking through what are the conflicts that would arise from a character who can do X, or who can't do X if it's a flaw. All right. Another way to get inspired for your central conflict is through a setting. And for all of you who write in distinct settings, for all of you people who love to world build and to create a really interesting time and place, so that might be writers of science fiction and fantasy, that might be writers of historical fiction, might be all you dystopian urban fantasy folks, and you really are interested in that world. What does that world look like? Grow your conflict out of your world. So here's an example. What would happen in a world where the United States was divided into people who were super wealthy and people who were so poor that they had to participate in these fights to the death amongst their teenage children just so that they would have enough to eat? Ooh, sounds familiar, right? That's the premise of the Hunger Games, and it's a really intriguing setting, right? It's a time and a place. Oh, kitty sighting. Hello, Mr. Bradbury. It's a time and a place and a set of circumstances that just helps you unfold the conflict. So here's a conflict, a setting wherein there's a cat who thinks the bookshelf is something stable to jump up onto. Let's see what happens. All right. So, the setting is a wonderful place to grow your conflict from. And just with one premise, you can start going, okay, well, what conflict would come from that? How could I solve it? And all these thoughts will start to blossom and balloon. And if I'm thinking of a conflict from the point of view of setting, I like to imagine I'm the cheesy announcer from movie previews who says, in a world where, right? And then you just put in the premise, and you're like, what would happen in that world? So in a world where water is as scarce and as precious as gold, ooh, what would happen, right? So the conflicts will just start coming. Okay, so that was getting inspired by a character and getting inspired by a setting. The third way I love to get inspired is with a theme. Ooh. The theme is your message. What do you want to show people? What is the nature of the universe? Are we living in a wonderful world where things always work out as long as you try hard enough? Or is the world a harsh place where you can never get ahead and nice guys finish last? Or is it something in between? Getting inspiration for your central conflict from a theme is really powerful for any of you who are top-down thinkers. If you tend to get ideas, big picture concepts, like abstract ideas about your story first, planning from theme can be really, really fun and probably something that you're good at. So what you do is you just come up with your theme. So not the cat, but the author, Ray Bradbury, is one of my favorite for theme, because he does a lot that really resonates with me. So I would say one of his common themes is, if we worship technology, then we lose our humanity. Okay, so I've got some idea. I want to show that things can go totally kaflooey if we focus too much on technology, and we'll stop being human beings. We'll lose our compassion. Then I think, oh, well, how would I do that? Well, I know I want to show people getting overly into technology, and then I want to show some bad outcome. So I know I've got those things in place, and then I can start building the details from there. But again, this is where you can get really inspired. What's the message you want to show? Do you want to show that family is the most important thing? Do you want to show that we can overcome all the odds? There are so many different messages and themes that can really grab you and be inspiring. And they can be happy and sappy, or they can be dark and gritty. But it's really what inspires you. And once you get that theme, again, you're just going to figure out how can you show people doing the thing that leads to some outcome. How can you show the outcome? And then how can you let us know through your tone and the resolution of the story what you think is good or bad about it. All right. So I've walked you through 3 ways you can get inspired about your central conflict. And that's starting with a character and asking, what would this character do and what problems would this character encounter? That's starting with a setting and asking those same questions. What problems would arise from this setting? Who's got power? Who doesn't? What would the power struggle be? That's a great question for setting. And then how to get inspired via a theme. What's the message I want to give, and what problem could help me deliver that message to people? The theme-inspired conflict, again, is really great for top-down thinkers. If you come up with the big picture first and then the details, I would say try one of those. If you are more of a bottom-up thinker, if you really love getting the details first and then you move to the big picture second, start with just a single character. Ooh, who is this character? What's her main trait, and where can I go with that? Or start with a world, start with a setting. Once you've gotten inspiration to create a central conflict, all the other scenes will come around eventually. This is the core. This is the place to begin that gives you, again, the lifeblood that's going to pump out to the rest of your story and inform all of those scenes. And just like your heart is really connected to all the parts of your body because of your circulatory system, this will also make sure that all those scenes you're creating are really connected to the core of your story. Coming up with your inspired central conflict is a wonderful way to rein in your creativity and make sure that all those great scenes you're writing, all those characters you're developing really fit with that core idea you've got. And it's going to drive you and give you momentum. When you are working on drafting or working on planning, you'll have this extra surge of energy because your core concept is something you're really excited about. All right, so that's my favorite strategy for coming up with a central conflict. I want to open it up to questions. Do you have a question about working on your central conflict, about what should be involved, what the problem should be? Where are you in your central conflict? So if you've got a question, please go ahead and put it in the comments. And as you're thinking about central conflict, remember that it just takes a spark. Right? Those conflicts, those example conflicts that I was giving are not very complicated. They will have more nuance built into them. You know, as you start drafting, of course you'll come up with these subplots. Of course you'll come up with other scenes and other characters who add richness to your plot. But all it takes to get going is that one core conflict. And the best way to get it is just from whatever inspires you to write, be that character, be that setting, theme, or a combination of them. All right. Well, thanks so much for watching. And if you like this video or found it helpful, please like it and share it with somebody else you think could use some help with coming up with a great central conflict. It's at the core of what we write when we're writing novels. It's really, really important, and it can be really, really fun and inspiring. All right. I will catch you all later. Happy writing. Bye.